Okay, guys, we're back with another lighting rendering unit for you. And this one's a big one. So, who better to have a big unit with than the big man himself, the Hulk? We're going to take a look at this little Hulk bust and do a whole bunch of things with it. Okay, lighting, of course, right? We're not going to be drawing on this, we're going to be lighting it. I'm going to use a few different techniques, nothing new, stuff we've already covered, but now we've got a more dynamic figure. And so it's going to be kind of a more complex situation going on here. I'm going to do kind of like that fill and take away technique. That's kind of my preference, right? So I just filled it with a whole shade. And normally what I would do is just say, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to use kind of a lighter brush here. I've got light coming in from the forward our left, right? So what would I do? I would just start shading it or lightening it up, right? Like the light is all coming. And if I want to, I can kind of come a bit bigger, right? Light's coming on this side, right? Maybe on the top here along the rim. There should be a bicep there, but that doesn't really count, right? So, that would be one way. And I could even get more detailed into the face. I could drop down the size of this and, kind of add a cheekbone, add a bit of that, put some highlights in the hair, right? So that's how I've been teaching you, that one light source from one direction, right? But why don't we switch it up? That's what we're here for. We're going to have two light sources. One's going to be forward left, one's going to be forward right, and they're the same color. Okay, so we're adding a second light source in here, and we're just going to kind of follow that same pattern just a little bit, right? And there we go. This almost is resembling like a backlight now. We kind of talked about that a little bit, lit from behind type of thing, right? But it's not. We're actually got two actual different light sources coming in. We've got forward left and forward right, and we can play with that a lot and see how it feels and stuff. And there we go. You can even put a little highlights in here, right? Sometimes it might catch. Okay, so nice and simple. Two light sources. Let's see what happens when we fill this guy in again with shade. And I know you're thinking, you're like, okay, I get it. Two light sources. Let me guess, he's going to do three. No, I'm not. Let's do it this way. Let's say one light source is above, right? So it's touching everything up here. Got his hair. Got a bit of the brow here, right? Bridge of the nose, maybe top of the chin, some of the cheek, that type of thing, right? Got the top of the pec, maybe a little bit of the ab here, maybe a little bit on the stone. That's one light source, right? We're going to do a second light source. Why don't we do green? From down below. So the second light source might be down in here. It's down here, right? And then lights under the under boob, right? Lights under here. Lights under the abs slightly, right? Okay. Maybe even we can come in and put a little rim under his jaw and his lip. Maybe the nose, maybe a little bit in the eye, right? There we go. So that's a second light source. We've got the blue coming from up top. We've got the green coming from below. Now the question is, why would we have a second light source, right? Like, where does this usually come from? Sometimes it's an artificial light. That can happen. That's actually pretty common, especially we go into a building or something, there could be multiple light sources, right? It can definitely happen that way. They could be different colors sometimes, right? But another time, it's actually not what you think it is. It's going to be something called bounce. So let's do this again. We'll do the same thing, and I'll make it a little bit simpler. The light source, the primary sun is up above, right? Okay, so this primary sun's nice and simple. It's coming from up above. But that sun, that directional sun coming from up above, hits whatever's down here. Actually, I'm going to do this for us. Let's see if I just had a cool idea. No, you're not probably going to like it that much, but that's okay. Let's say that this pedestal that he's sitting on is this ugly, whatever, I don't know, off pink purple color, right? Okay. So he's sitting on this pink purple color. We've got light coming down. It's kind of an off yellowish white. What happens? What happens when this light hits here and bounces back up? Well, this is what happens. You get this reflection off of that, and the light, what we call bounce lighting, will catch and rim these things down here. Okay. So what you want to do, sometimes you can do it in a bit of a gradient, you can do it a bit of a soft brush here or whatever, and you'll find that this makes a lot more sense. So this light is coming down, it hits whatever surface you're on, and it bounces up just a bit, right? Obviously, I'm not being that careful here, but you get the point that it'll bounce up and hit whatever shapes and forms would be down there, right? So that's a bit of a bounce light. Bounce light bouncing off a surface and grabbing the color of the surface. That's what often happens, okay? You don't notice it always in the daytime if you're walking down the sidewalk because the light is kind of off-white, the sidewalk's off-white, and everything just kind of gets off-white, right? But you'll really notice it if you're standing over something very special. So let's do this again. And let's go with this kind of off sunshine. Ooh, wrong brush. You know, the light's coming from above. Nice and simple, right? The light's coming from above. But he's standing in water. So what happens then? Well, just as you would expect, it's this blue type of thing. And sometimes you could do it running like this. Sometimes you could do more of a, let's see, more like just a general gradient that starts harsh down here and kind of filters up here, right? Okay. So you can have it blue is a harsher one, the glow, and the glow just kind of barely touches by the time it gets near the top or something, right? Something along these lines. Okay. And then, you know, it depends on what you're doing with it, but like if it's water, you can, you know, have this kind of swirl effect, right? That the water has a bit of a pattern to it or something, right? You could do that kind of thing if you're working digitally. If not, it's a little tedious to do it your own way, right? But it can be done, right? Okay, so that's another way of doing it, right? That you have this bounce light bouncing off whatever surface it is, liquid or solid, and coming up, and you can see it kind of dancing around on the figure. Okay, let's see. I keep using this nice gray to color in, right? And I think it's good if we keep practicing different lighting. Look at the colors that we can use here. You know, what happens when we have more of an orangish red, and we can get a little bit more into it, right? It's coming from this side. One thing you can notice is like it can fade out and it can get a lot harsher as it comes closer to the light, right? It comes as it gets really close to that light source, just as we talked about all light sources, it gets a lot harder, harsher, more defined, the colors stronger, and depends what you've got going on. Do you have do you have markers you're using? You know, can you smudge with it? Can you blend? Are you using a digital process, right? There's a lot of things that you could do to kind of blend this out, right? Okay, so play with different colors. Obviously, you know, we're looking at this and we're thinking, oh, well, the sun's touching, or some kind of maybe a sunset, something pretty harsh for this lighting, right? That has this impact. And where would it touch? Would it touch, the neck? Would it touch the chin here? Would it maybe touch this other brow? Would it do little highlights in the face? And then, like I said, if you got something, you can come in and smudge just a little bit. Maybe that gives the desired effect of what you're looking for, right? Pause. Another thing that can happen sometimes is the light source is not off the figure, but instead on the figure, right? So again, I'm going with my base shade here, and you can do it any way you want. I'm just, for simplicity's sake, right? And the light source, let's go with blue here. The light source is the eyes. Let's say he's got these electric eyes or something, right? And they're shooting all over the place. There's electricity, there's sparks, and obviously I would take more time with this or whatever, but we can do it for teaching's sake, that something along these lines, right? Then this is the one light source, or we could have two. Why don't we go with this? This is the one light source, right? And so what happens? Well, things become lighter around that source, and even more so as you get closer to it, it could get really light, right? And then what happens is everything that would kind of touch gets lit up, right? Everything that would come close to touching would just be, again, touched by that light, right? The shadow would be maybe harsher down here, right? But pay attention to what's causing that light. Maybe some little highlights up in the hair somewhere. That could be, we can add that up in the hair. Give it some definition in the nose, the lip, the chin, that type of thing, right? So the light source doesn't always have to be off the figure. The light source can be on the figure, coming from the figure, whether it's like Iron Man's chest, something along those lines, right? And of course, you could add a secondary light source. You could add whatever. Just keep in mind that it can come straight from something on that figure, right? All right. What else do we got here? I'm going to come in and shade. Sometimes what you can do, just as you're starting a figure, and especially if you're using pencils and stuff like that, is you're going to have no color. I've been playing a lot with color here to show you guys something, right? So I'm going to color pick this, and you can see where it is off to the bottom left-hand side. And all I'm going to do is move that up a little bit. And let's see, where should we have the light source here? Let's go with left. I like left. Left is easy. So the light source is going to be here. And I could just kind of almost make it simple like this. The light source is from the left. And now I'm going to keep bouncing back and forth and say, well, let's see, make it darker on this side. There we go. Keep making it darker. There we go. Right, and I'm just going to build up the tonal values. And like I said, you could do this with markers, with pencils, whatever you're working in. If you're working in a very similar range of, it's just one monotone color, right? You can bounce back and forth between this. And kind of do that way, right? Come all the way down to almost black. And just keep working that tonal value. And maybe, for example, I'm doing a little trick here that's digital, but I'm selecting this tool, right? And then I'm gonna come and fill this in as if it's a cast shadow off this head, right? Okay. And then if I want to, I can come and blend it out just a little bit, right? Depending on how close you want that that shadow to be to realistic, right? Okay. So that's one way of doing it, is just using just one color and just running the spectrum on the tonal value of it, right? You can see we've got a lot of options here, a lot of things that we can do here that, for better or worse, you know, we we can play around with it. Sometimes you can get really funky. And let's say, for an example, let's say I add this green in here, right? This green is coming from this side. Now this is a purely digital trick, but you can kind of replicate it in traditional ways sometimes with markers or pencil crayons. Each rendering technique is going to have its own little tricks to it, right? Or each rendering approach. So we'll see. What happens here is what I'm doing is creating a layer, filling it with black, and then switching it to something like a color dodge. Okay, maybe I'll keep that up there. And then coming over this again, and you can see how it burns it out, right? This is obviously like using harsh whites, something along those lines, right? But you can really catch almost a liquid feel to it, right? To the highlights. So I know when I use markers, I use kind of a gel pen, a white gel pen, to give this liquefied type of feeling, right? So imagine if you laid down some light color and then you liquefy, you know, a white gel on top of it. That's a similar effect that you can be doing here, right? There's a lot of cool things you can be doing. One more thing that I'm going to show you guys, just as we kind of wrap up here, is, and listen, we could go over lighting schemes again and again and again, you know, for ad nauseum type of thing, right? Like, there's so many lighting approaches. I've taught you 2 different ones. Oh, you know what? Last one I want to teach you here is more of a rim light. This one is, let's say, once again, we've got a normal light that's coming in from the left, right? So I kind of highlight or, you know, erase some points and stuff like that. Most of it's coming in from the left. And I maybe even come over here and put a little bit of darkness into this side. That's coming from the right. You know, it's really dark on this side, right? The head casts and stuff, right? But let's say there's a really harsh light on the other side, okay? So what I can do is just use a very small, thin line and do a bit of a rim here. Do not call this a rim job. This is just rim lighting, okay? So it would just kind of, almost like a backlight or something, it would just touch on certain points. Okay. If anything, sometimes it just covers the outline of the character. Like, it doesn't always come in here. It depends. This section is kind of optional and stuff, but a lot of times it'll just run the outside of it, giving it almost a halo effect, but with an actual lighting scheme behind it, right? Okay, guys, if we look at all of these approaches, you can see that we can have the same color twice from 2 different light sources, but same color. We can switch it up and have 2 different sources, different colors, right? We can have a bit of a bounce light reflecting off of a surface and then carrying that color up. We can have that same thing with something like water or fire. You know, it's going to have this kind of moving effect to it, right? We can start to play with the intensity of the light as it gets closer to the object, right? Or to what subject we're lighting. We can throw the lighting on top of the subject and have it radiating outwards, right? We can play with tonal values a lot. That's another approach. We can start to liquefy and use really harsh highlights, and that also has a pretty cool effect, right? Very wet looking. And then we can use a rim light. And again, photography is really where it's at. Studying photography and all the different approaches to lighting, it's mind-blowing. It's awesome. And this are 9 examples that will help you in trying to understand how you're going to approach your rendering for whatever subjects you're working on. I hope this helped, guys. This is a really, I don't know, there's tons of value in here, and I'm going to include this worksheet so that you can practice. I want you to print it out maybe a few times, and just first time you just get used to the forms of the Hulk, folding over the muscles and that kind of thing of lighting and stuff, right? Maybe even try it once with just one light source. Try the whole sheet again with 2 light sources and moving them all around. And then try it again with a bunch of different effects and see how it works for you and see what kind of knowledge you pull after that. Because I guarantee if you get this down, when you're working on your bigger pieces, it's going to be kind of mind-blowing. Have fun.